New York, the city that the whole world sees as the ultimate symbol of wealth, glamour, and endless opportunities. Luxury storefronts on Fifth Avenue, yellow taxis weaving through hurried crowds, Wall Street millionaires, Broadway musicals, celebrities strolling through Central Park. A city that never sleeps, immortalized in so many films and songs as the metropolis of dreams. In fact, not long ago, we showed you this side of luxury here on our channel, the life of the New York elite, with private jets, armored cars, mansions worth tens of millions, and even face masks made of gold and crushed pearls. If you haven't seen it yet, look for What Is It Like to Live in New York Without Limits? Pure luxury and ostentation. But what about the other side? Have you ever wondered what it's like to live in the other New York, where millions of people struggle every day just to survive? People counting coins to pay the rent, exhausted workers taking 3 buses to get home, families sleeping in shelters, people facing winter on the freezing sidewalks. Today, Bello Mundo takes you inside this reality to show you how the poor live in one of the richest cities in the United States. Number 1. Poverty and inequality. New York is exaggerated in everything, in size, diversity, culture, and also in inequality. On one side are some of the richest people on the planet, Wall Street billionaires, tech CEOs, heiresses who don't even know how much a subway ticket costs. People who buy $50 million apartments as if they were pocket change. On the other, according to the US Census, 18% of the population officially lived below the poverty line in 2023. That is, almost 2 million people. They are store clerks, cooks, cleaners, delivery drivers, and drivers. People who keep New York running, but who can barely afford the basics. However, these numbers may be much higher. The official calculation uses a federal criterion, the same for the entire country, ignoring the fact that the cost of living in New York is one of the highest in the United States. And it is this inequality that we are going to talk about now. Number 2. Cost of living and inequality. Let's start with the basics. Rent. Today, a 1-bedroom apartment costs an average of $2,700 per month. In Manhattan, it easily exceeds $4,000, and we're talking about tiny places. Those who earn the local minimum wage of $15 an hour can't afford even half of that without compromising their entire income. And that's where the juggling begins. People sharing apartments with strangers, entire families living crammed into a single room, people sleeping in basements, makeshift garages, or on someone's couch. The famous "one more can fit" is no longer the exception. It's become the rule. But rent is only the first hurdle. Monthly bills also weigh heavily on the budget. Electricity, gas, water, internet, all above the national average. Electricity, for example, costs about 44% more than in other parts of the country. During the winter, when the heater needs to be on practically all day, a typical bill can easily exceed $200. The situation is not much better when it comes to public transportation. Each subway trip costs $2.90, and a monthly pass, which many people need to get to work, costs $132. For someone who earns around $2,000 a month, transportation alone consumes more than 6% of their net income. And food is not far behind. Even without eating out, a single person can spend between $300 and $500 a month at the supermarket alone. Families with children need much more, and many already rely on food banks, NGOs, and donations to cover the basics. Queues at these places, especially in poorer neighborhoods, have become even more common since the pandemic. With so many fixed expenses and tight salaries, Many people end the month in the red. It is common to see people delaying one bill to pay another, getting into credit card debt, which here charges very high interest rates, reaching up to 20% per year, and entering a cycle that seems to have no end. Meanwhile, the richest 20% of the city account for almost 60% of all income generated. It is as if one part of New York lives in something close to Sweden and the other in Haiti. It is no wonder that food lines, especially in poorer neighborhoods, have grown since the pandemic. And if the numbers are shocking, the reality behind them is even harsher. But who are these people? Where do they live? Or rather, how do they survive? That's what we're going to look at now. Number 3. Those most affected. Unlike in poorer countries, poverty in New York is not always obvious. You won't find large slums, wooden shacks, or makeshift buildings. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. In fact, it's everywhere, just in a quieter, more camouflaged way. And perhaps because of that, even more cruel. It's in the overcrowded apartments where 5 or 6 people share a tiny room. It's in the lines that form at food banks. It's in the mothers who work 2 jobs and still can't afford daycare for their children. It's in the elderly who, with their meager pensions, have to choose between buying medicine or heating their homes during the winter. Yes, many people imagine that in a wealthy city like New York, the elderly are well cared for. But the reality is quite different. In 2023, the poverty rate among New Yorkers over the age of 65 increased by more than 20%. The end of emergency pandemic aid and rising inflation have exacerbated an already delicate situation. Many live solely on Social Security, which covers the bare minimum. When rent consumes a large portion of their income, they are left with the difficult choice between paying for medicine or buying food. Another group that suffers in silence is people with disabilities or chronic illnesses. They face even more barriers to finding formal employment and often depend on public benefits, which barely cover their basic needs. Poverty in these cases is mixed with neglect. There is a lack of access, adaptation, and inclusion. And as much as the city likes to sell itself as diverse and welcoming, the most vulnerable remain the same. Black people, Latinos, single mothers, undocumented immigrants, and people with poor health. Number 4. Where they live. There are neighborhoods in New York where poverty is not the exception, it is the rule. In some of these areas, about 40% of residents live below the poverty line. There, children grow up in schools with no infrastructure, surrounded by old, poorly maintained buildings. Access to health care, recreation, and even basic food is limited. In the Bronx, for example, neighborhoods such as Mott Haven and Hunts Point have some of the worst social indicators in the city: poor transportation, precarious access to health care, and dilapidated housing. In Brooklyn, Brownsville faces a similar reality, dominated by old housing projects and a lack of government services. It is in these neighborhoods that the famous projects are located, the housing projects of NYCHA, the New York City Housing Authority. In total, more than 500,000 people live in these buildings. However, living there is not synonymous with comfort. Most of the buildings were constructed between the 5th and 7th decades of the last century and are now in critical condition. Mold, leaks, broken elevators, and heaters that don't work in the winter. Residents request repairs that never come. The orders pile up while the structure slowly crumbles. These complexes are also located in areas with less urban infrastructure, far from the city center, with poor schools, few shops, and limited transportation. In the end, it seems as if they have been forgotten, islands of neglect within one of the richest cities in the world. Still, they are the only chance at stability for many people. Rent is proportional to income. Those who earn less pay less. This is what prevents thousands of families from ending up on the streets. But getting a spot is almost like winning the lottery. The waiting list is huge, and NYCHA has already stated that it would need more than $40 billion to renovate the existing buildings. Money that, for now, has not appeared. But it could get worse, right? For those who don't even have a permanent address, the struggle is even harder. Number 5. Housing crisis, social housing, and homelessness. Having a roof over your head should be a basic right. But in New York, it has become almost a luxury. Today, more than 100,000 people sleep in municipal shelters every night. 100,000. It's as if an entire city were living stacked in gyms, repurposed hotels, old buildings, and makeshift centers scattered throughout the metropolis. And that number doesn't include those who are outside the official system. There are thousands of people sleeping on sidewalks, subway stations, park benches, or inside cars. Others live on charity, couch surfing, staying with friends or relatives. They don't show up in the statistics on homelessness, but they don't have a home to call their own either. New York is one of the few American cities that guarantees the right to shelter. That is, the city is legally required to provide a place to sleep to anyone who asks. But the system is overwhelmed. Shelters are overcrowded, poorly maintained, understaffed, and plagued by reports of violence and a lack of privacy. Entire families with young children end up spending months there, with no idea when or if they will find a permanent home. The crisis has worsened in recent years with the arrival of thousands of vulnerable immigrants who are also entitled to shelter. In addition, with skyrocketing rents, many people who were previously able to get by have been evicted and unable to return to the formal housing market. The most shocking thing is that a significant number of these people have jobs. There are people leaving the shelter in the morning, taking the subway, going to work as attendants, cleaning assistants, cooks, nurses, and returning at night to sleep in a shelter. Because in New York, sometimes even a salary isn't enough. You can work Monday through Friday, pay taxes, keep to a schedule, and still be homeless. Number 6. Health. As if having to choose between eating and paying rent weren't enough. Imagine getting sick. Being poor in New York isn't just about living on very little. It's about living without the basics, or paying too much for them. And this becomes even more evident when it comes to health. Unlike many countries that have free healthcare systems, the United States does not offer this type of coverage to the entire population, and New York is no exception. In other words, here, healthcare is treated as a private service, which means that practically everything has to be paid for: doctor's appointments, tests, hospital stays, medications, and even ambulance transportation. The costs are so high that many people avoid seeking medical care for fear of the bill. There are reports of people who go weeks in pain because they can't afford to see a dentist, or who hesitate to call emergency services even in serious situations because they know that a simple ambulance ride can cost over $1,000. A hospital stay, depending on the case, can easily exceed $10,000. For the low-income population, there is Medicaid, a kind of public health insurance for people with very low incomes. However, access to this program is restricted and full of bureaucratic criteria, in addition to facing another major obstacle. Not all doctors and clinics accept patients with this coverage. The result is that many people depend on a few public hospitals, which are always crowded, or have to wait for joint efforts organized by NGOs and volunteer associations. Undocumented immigrants, for example, are unlikely to qualify for any type of health benefit, even if they have been contributing to the informal labor market for years. They end up resorting to community clinics or simply making do with home remedies, hoping their condition does not worsen. Mental health has also become a critical issue. The increase in anxiety, depression, and chronic stress among the poorest is visible, but access to psychologists and psychiatrists who charge high fees per session remains a privilege for the few. Meanwhile, those who need this care the most are stuck in an exhausting and unhealthy routine with no time, money, or support to take care of their own health. Ultimately, being poor in New York means knowing that if your body fails, the system fails with it. Number 7. What the government does and doesn't do. Faced with all this, many people ask themselves, what is the government doing? New York does try. The city has a much broader social support network than other parts of the United States. It has municipal shelters, free food programs, rent assistance, public daycare centers, city-run hospitals, food stamps, shelters for homeless youth, and even facilities to receive newly arrived immigrants. But the problem isn't just having the programs, it's making them work in practice. NYCHA, which manages the public housing projects we mentioned earlier, is overwhelmed. Funding is lacking, buildings are deteriorating, and thousands of families are waiting in line for a spot that may never come. SNAP, the food stamp program, helps millions of people, but the amount is low and the criteria for eligibility are very restrictive. Medicaid, which we mentioned in the health section, covers many low-income people, but not everyone qualifies. And when they do, they still face the difficulty of finding doctors who accept the plan. There is also HUD, a federal department focused on housing. They even finance affordable housing projects, but everything moves in slow motion. Construction takes forever, renovations don't even start, and there never seems to be enough money. In theory, the system exists. In practice, the line is too long for the structure that is in place. And along the way, many people give up, get lost, or simply cannot access anything. Meanwhile, measures that could tackle the problem at its root, such as real rent control, an increase in the supply of decent housing, or a minimum wage adjusted to the cost of living in the city, remain stalled due to a lack of political will. There is a lack of courage to take on the real estate market. There is a lack of constant public pressure, and above all, there is a lack of priority. But what there is no shortage of is people in need. In the end, being poor in New York means carrying the weight of a city that never stops and never waits. It means waking up early, going to bed late, and getting by however you can. It means living far away, eating whatever you can find, living in fear of illness or falling behind on rent. It means watching luxury pass you by and knowing it will never come close. It means existing between the window display and the backstage. And the scariest part, it's happening in the richest city in the United States, the city of opportunity, the city everyone wants to visit. But once they get to know it, many just want to get out. To change this reality, charity is not enough. Real public policy is needed. Decent housing, affordable transportation, fair work, good schools, healthcare for all. Only then will New York cease to be a divided city and begin to be a fair city. Until then, those who are poor in New York will continue to fight with courage, with resilience, but also with exhaustion. What about you? Did you ever imagine that poverty was so prevalent in the most famous city in the world? Tell us in the comments. What surprised you most about this reality in New York? Take the opportunity to enjoy the video, subscribe here at Bello Mundo, and turn on notifications. That way you won't miss any episodes of our series. Next week, we'll be back with another surprising destination to answer, without beating around the bush. What is it like to be poor somewhere in this big world? Thank you very much for joining us. See you then.